So this study skills video will hopefully help you really optimize your note making ability. I think it's something that as teachers we assume that you know how to do, and some of you might be fantastic, but I think we've all had lots of evidence that we need to guide you a little bit more in these kinds of skills. And you know, it's Sod's law that in an examination subject, half of the final exam questions will come from those notes that you missed in lectures, or the lesson you didn't attend, or the notes you didn't make. The other half will come from the notes you can't read properly because your writing or your note making was so disorganised and chaotic. So it's absolutely essential that we sort of learn about how to or different structures and methods that you can use to make really effective notes. And actually, just as evidence for you, these were actually AS students, and this was a survey that they had been asked to do to give sort of make them think about their year and also give us some information to help us improve our course. So the question was, what one thing could you have done to improve your learning throughout the year? And interestingly, of the comments that were made, there's one saying making notes throughout the year, 2 reading over notes as we went through them, and 3 read about the specific topic before learning about it in class, or rereading the notes that they had made before we went to the next session. And that really is perfect evidence of what I hope to help you to do in this video. So note making might come from you reading a source, a text, it might be looking at a video, or it might obviously be from listening in lessons. And you know, hopefully by now you've listened to the active listening video, so you know a little bit of the sorts of ways to do that. In terms of reading and making notes, it very much depends on what you're trying to achieve as to how you might read. So you can see here we've got several different techniques for reading. You can scan read if you're looking for particular phrases or specific words. You might skim read an article just to get the general gist of the article. You know, without knowing every single detail that the article is saying, you'll get an understanding of what it's generally about. You might recap or rapidly read something for revision purposes. You might have in-depth reading, so when you've got to absolutely get your head around everything that's involved in a piece of information, you need to take your time and perhaps read it more than once. You might have to read critically, so begin whilst you're reading it to not just accept everything you're reading, but read it with a big question mark over the content. So you're analysing the content. Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? What was the author trying to say? Or what would you challenge? So that's a critical reading style. If you've finished an essay or a 10-mark question or an assignment for BTEC and you think that you're ready to submit it, you should probably read that intensively and proofread it for mistakes, for errors, you know, and any informational correction. Or if you're doing research, so you've got a big project, then you might have extensive reading where you'd have to do a lot of background information. You know, it's very much volume reading. It's not just a short couple of paragraphs. You have to look at lots of documents. So I definitely suggest that you'll be scanning and skimming, and you should be proofreading as well. So what's the difference then between note taking, because we often say, right, make sure you take notes, and note making? And you can see from the text here that actually note taking is relatively passive process. It literally is you hearing something or reading something and copying it. So it's a very passive process. You don't necessarily even have to understand what you're writing in note taking. You're just copying stuff down. And I think this is what a lot of students do or think is the right thing to do. And it's not the most helpful form of, you know, structured notes. Note making is what I'd like you all to learn, and this is in sort of contrast a very active process where you're not just hearing information, you're listening to information. Your brain is actively thinking through the meaning of what you're hearing, and you're then processing it, deciding what to write down, deciding what to ignore, deciding what maybe to focus on as a key point, or what might be other supporting notes to jot down. So note making is very much the sort of note processing that we're going to try to learn, hence the star. So what are the key elements of note making then that make it different from just taking notes? It's an active process, we've established that. It forces you to think and decide what to write, not just write everything I see or hear. It helps you focus and concentrate on the content, so you're actually drawn into the content, actively thinking about what it means. This will therefore help your understanding. If you're just passively writing things down, you're not processing it in your brain, you won't necessarily understand. And if you're doing this note making process, you have to understand, because you have to choose what to write down. And what is best is if you put your notes in your own words. Yes, there might be terminology you copy, but it's really, really important that you try to phrase things in a way that you understand. Some students make notes, go away, read the notes and haven't got a clue what it means because it's not their language or it's not their phrases. So really, really try and put things in your own words. And in turn, of course, this will help you remember. It will make the note making you've done much more meaningful. And obviously, once you've made those notes, it's a permanent record that you can use on later occasions. So it's really, really valuable skill to have. So there's two sort of ways I want to show you for how to make notes. One is a more sort of traditional linear note making method. So this is quite often how notes are done. This perhaps is more the note-taking style, so the passive, not really thinking about it, just making lists or copying information. And because it's so passive and so sort of limited, you only use the left side of your brain. It's a relatively limited process. So more traditional. It includes keywords, phrases, maybe some underlying and highlighting, and only uses the left side of the brain. And this is what it might look like. So if I was making notes or taking notes on the benefits of hosting the Olympics, I'd have a list or a stream of notes with this is the key point and these are the sub-points. However, there's an alternative which you may prefer and can be really valuable. Now, this image actually is of a piece of software called Inspiration 8, which I will make a video for and I will show you because it's fantastic for revision. But this is called pattern note making or mind mapping. So as you saw from that image, mind mapping is much more visual. It bases the structure or the pattern of your notes around a central theme, and then you often have branches heading out of that central theme or topic or point, which you then can develop and develop and develop. So incredibly visual. You can use colors, you can use images, and because you're having to process the information that you're making notes on to decide what to connect to what or what to include, this engages the right side of your brain. And the visual nature of this mind mapping process engages the right side of your brain. So again, a really simplistic alternative to our linear note list would be the central theme of the benefits of the Olympics, and off here we'd have the UK London sport, off here we'd have further points, and so on over here, and so on over here. So it develops, it makes you think in a process sort of route. Inspiration 8, by the way, is on all of your college computers, so you should always have access to it. So what are the key bits that we need to bear in mind when we are mind mapping or pattern note making? As I said before, a central heading or concept. There are keywords that you would branch off, and it does make you think in a very concise way. You wouldn't have sprawling list of, lines and lines of text. You make this literally note form. You'd have subtopics or sub-headings that you can highlight or circle or box to make it, again, very visual. You can underline and highlight for emphasis. You can use symbols or images or colour. We know that there are branches and arrows that radiate off that central heading or concept. It's much easier to recall, particularly if you're a visual learner, through this sort of image presentation, and it allows you to add on to things rather than the linear notes where you'd sort of run out of space. So you can, again, at a later date, easily develop your mind map to add further information. It's great, as I said before, for revision. So for maybe every topic or booklet that you work through or assignment that you have, you could make an Inspiration 8 mind map, or you can just do it on paper. It's no different either way. And without wishing to state the obvious, highlighting, annotating and underlining, sort of three skills that you can use with your notes to draw attention to the central or most important points. Obviously, if you highlight everything in a text, that really defeats the object of focusing or drawing out particular meaning. So be quite selective with what you choose to underline or to highlight. It could be that you use different colour highlighting or underlining for different points or different elements of meaning, but it's really valuable to do this to your work. If it's an examination question, you should annotate the question, as in identify the verb, what's the general topic, or what's the specific requirement. Or in an assignment brief for BTEC, you could use these skills to really get to grips with exactly what you're being asked to do. And often you might then, once you've highlighted notes in a text, you would then transfer these notes in your own words onto a separate note sheet or information sheet that you're producing. Summarising is a really important note-taking skill, so it could be that you've had to read a chapter of a book or read a paragraph or read an article, and then rather than making line by line notes, you could just summarise, bring all those notes together, and then put in your own words an overall meaning from that piece of information. Abbreviations are really useful. Those of you that I will teach, will get used to a variety of abbreviations. It really helps speed your note making along. Particularly for BTEC, but anybody who goes on to university, this will be really important. Wherever you get your information from, you should really note down the source of that information. So if you use a particular textbook, you should note down the source of that textbook, because BTEC students will need to do referencing in their assignments, and all of you that intend to go to university, Harvard referencing is a fundamental of university work. So you have to get in the habit at some point of jotting down where you get certain bits of information. And just really to begin to wrap up, so once you've made your notes, that's not the end of the story. Sometimes I believe students make notes, whether they're good, bad or ugly notes. They leave the lesson, they go home, they put them in their file, and that's where they stay. So actually, after a session and where you've made notes, you should immediately check the content, because that's when it's freshest. Within a day, within 24 hours, you should revisit those notes, and in that process you will fine-tune them. You might make them more concise, you might decide that certain bits were less important to leave them out, then revisit them. Make sure that they don't just stay in your file. If you have another session on this topic, always preview your notes, reread them before you go to that session, and eventually, if it's for an examination, make revision notes, which again become increasingly concise. So your pattern of using notes or making notes could be represented in this diagram, and I suggest you pause the video and just have a sensible look at it. Go into class, making notes, asking teachers for clarity, reviewing the notes, ideally the same day. See if you have any questions, identify key topics or words. Read text selectively, so if there's any other further information to check out, do any homeworks that are associated with it, check with the teacher if you need any extra help, review the notes, make sure that they're perfect, use them to prepare your revision materials, and then revisit them.